replays on Saturday and Sunday. It's going to be wet. If you're in the West Coast, if you're in California, it's going to be wet. But we need the rain. I mean, that's always the positive thing about something. I mean, usually rain is like, oh, it's rainy. It's bad. No, we need it. We need the rain. It's our drought-forsaken California. Hey, look, thank you for being here. I'm here Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific. And if you are here and you're saying, wow, he's pressing that little thing and it's not showing 2 p.m. Yeah, 2 p.m. Pacific live, Monday through Friday. You're probably saying, yeah, Emil, it is like 1:53. Ah, you special person, you. Yeah, this is our lagniappe section. We're giving you that little something extra. Like I said, and I come from a long line of restaurant workers, and some of whom were waiters. And my manong Eddie, he worked at this one restaurant downtown. And if he liked you, or if the maitre d' or the chef liked you, he'd signal something to Eddie. So, give that, and Eddie would bring you something extra, that little something extra, that lagniappe, and then he'd like wink. And then you say, wow, they're giving me an extra fork. No, something better than an extra fork. Oh, they're giving me another napkin. No, not another napkin. Something good, like, something special from the kitchen. Because they got a direct link. Because it's their cousin running the kitchen. They're giving you a little something extra. Lagniappe. Anyway, so if you're here, it's 1:54. We usually start the program at 2. Emil Amok's Takeout, what I call the micro talk show of the AAPI and the AAXs and the, if you're none of those, Asian American, Filipino, Asian American, Chinese, Asian American, AAX, right? You can just be an ALL. We let those people in. Welcome, you ALLs. You might learn something. This is in English. This show's in English. You should be able to understand. Even Travis Kelce, the white tight end of the Kansas City Chiefs, who we made fun of earlier, he said, well, people just have to bees themselves. Bees themselves? I don't know if that's in Funkin' Wagnalls. You got to bees yourself. Please, but in that direction. Anyway, of course, bees yourself. But that's a white guy. Travis Kelce, Kansas City Chiefs tight end. On the Monday show, we made fun of him. Well, I mean, in a nice way. I mean, we didn't say he was ignorant. I mean, that maybe should be apparent. But he showed that he had a problem with English grammar. We play well if we just bees ourselves. Well, you can't beat yourself if you bees yourself. So anyway, this is our lagniappe section. Today, though, on this show, we're going to talk about Betty Yu, the KPIX TV reporter. Some of you may know me from my TV days. And my TV days go way back now. I used to say, oh, yeah, that was like 20 years. No, Emil, a little longer. Oh, yeah, it was about like 30 years ago. No, Emil, a little longer. Well, it was like about 40 years. Yes, Emil. It was that long. TVs were in tubes, but there was color. There was color TV, and they could see that you, in fact, were slightly brown, unless you like flooded the lights, and then you look like indistinguishable from someone else with a bunch of floodlights on their face. So I want to talk about Betty Yu. I'm gonna talk about what happened to her in the social media, because this is a show on social media on different platforms. I'm on Emil Amok on Twitter right now. If you're on Twitter, you go Emil Amok. Hey, where? Oh, look. And the browser on Twitter isn't that bad, but you can actually see the whole show And then it's also on Facebook Live or Facebook Watch or whatever they want to call it these days. You can catch it on my Facebook page, emilguillermo.media. You can also catch it on amok.com, not live. A little later on, I'll post it. But this is about social media, this show, this democratizing thing where I can come on and do this micro talk show and talk about the issues that are important to Asian Americans. Important to, well, you're not going to have Asian American issues talked about on regular mainstream talk shows. They're going to say, well, you got to kill 6 Asian Americans first. When 6 Asian Americans are killed, like in Atlanta, well, they'll talk about us. And then they'll say, oh, all those times we didn't talk about those Asian Americans. We should have, because now we don't know what to think when 6 are dead in Atlanta. That's what happened, right? That's what happened. And it was all started up when, well, a few months after Donald Trump started talking about China virus and Kung flu. And people warned him, like, hey, scapegoat the Asian Americans, and you'll see the reaction. And what happened? We got the reaction. And now suddenly we're on the map. People see us. They still don't talk about as much. Not even on Filipino American History Month or Asian American Heritage Month in May. Filipino American History Month in October. So here's the thing. I'm my inbox. I'm just paying attention to the news. And friends of mine, I have Latinx friends and white friends, and they're all woke, as they should be. And they tell me about at Betty KPIX. That's her Twitter handle. And at Betty at KPIX has been bullied, cyber bullied, essentially. And really, it's a low level microtransgression. Now that's pretty low, but it's pretty real when you have 9,000 instances of them since the pandemic began, according to Stop AAPI Hate. You got to pay attention to all of them. And you got to expose them and point your finger and say, look, this is what's happening. And now they're going after a public figure, because that's what a television reporter is. A television reporter is a public figure, a visible one. And where you're just doing your job, reporting a story. Betty Yu was on KPX talking about In-N-Out, the burger chain, and how for some reason they don't want to be responsible on their end as a food operation. They don't want to be responsible for public health. They don't want to ask people for, documentation of their vaccination records as prescribed by the health laws in San Francisco. They don't want to be the vaccine cops. Well, from what I recall, if you are serving up food to the public in a public space, well, laws apply to you. Yeah, you wouldn't want to put no toilet paper in your bathrooms or let the bathrooms go unwashed or unsanitized. Yeah, you wouldn't want anyone to know about the rat feces in the kitchen. There are laws about that. And this is just one of those laws in the era of the pandemic. If you're going to serve people in public or in your restaurant, indoors, they got to show their documentation. It's funny. The new undocumented, the people without vaccination cards. Because what? They're above it all? Now, those are the undocumented that we need to get rid of. By get rid of is make them eat in another county because they are a threat to the well-being and health of the people in the county where that law exists. In this case, San Francisco, but there was another situation at an In-N-Out in Contra Costa. And so here's Betty Yu reporting the facts about In-N-Out, saying we're not going to follow this and how it's against the public health laws in San Francisco, doing her job. And of course, it's out there. She's a public figure. And what do people do? Well, they send it to a social media talk show. Okay, look, this may seem like a social media talk show, but I talk truth. I may opine, but once again, I talk truth. And they looked at, and these are all white guys. Of course, it was a white show. And it was basically a conservative show. The guys who run the show used to be on Fox. Used to be. They also used to be on, or they're associated with another conservative network. And there they were, seeing Betty Yu report the story about In-N-Out and saying, oh, she is aggressively Asian. What does that mean? Aggressively Asian. Does it mean she speaks out? Means that she is intelligent, no accent, knows what she's talking about? She excels at her job? And yet these two white guys are exchanging banter, joking about. In the end, one of them is saying, oh, wait a minute, these are Americanized Asians. Watch out. It's like the real thing, which is another kind of insult. Americanized Asian. They're Americans. I'm born here. I guess I would be an Americanized. I was Americanized when I came out of my mother's womb in San Francisco. So it's offensive rhetoric. And it is a microaggression, perhaps a low-level microaggression, but a microaggression just the same. It doesn't encourage discourse. It fans the flame of hate. It's a little ember. It shouldn't be acceptable. Not, look, I'm a big First Amendment guy. This is somewhat problematic because are we saying we should censor these guys? Well, we should send a note to YouTube and talk about how point the finger. And this is what's happened. I saw it in my inbox on Twitter. And here I am talking about it. Other people have seen it. Other people are talking about it. We shine a light on this instance. When we see it, we shine the light, we expose it. That may unfortunately be one of the best things we can do. Shut them down? I don't know if that's going to happen. You can write a letter to YouTube. If you know how to send something to YouTube, you could, Facebook is supposedly trying to cut back or cut down on people who are spreading misinformation or spread lies or, racist hate. But that's one of these things about these guys on YouTube. What they did to Betty Yu was they made fun of her with these stupid, ignorant remarks in public. They went after her in an ad hominem way, which is beyond debate. And I said in my response to the tweet, I said, appalling, but not surprising for racist social media, which is actually really the fact. I wasn't surprised to see that these guys, essentially, morning show shock jocks, comedians, I guess it's called like a comedy news type show. There is this hybrid where you're allowed this sort of leeway. But I said I wasn't surprised. It's appalling. We should essentially implying we should shine a light and expose all this, because out of the 9,000 instances that were exposed by Stop AAPI Hate, the majority of which were essentially things like this, but said to people in private, said to people who weren't public figures, said to people who were just innocent. They were Asians in public, Asians in real life. And they get creamed by people with no sense of decorum, no sense of respect. That's why we need to expose it. By saying, look, this happens to the people who are on the front lines, right? Essentially, the Asian American first responders on the media, like Betty U at KPIX. And then I said in my tweet to Betty and to her friends who tweeted me and said, you got to do something about this. Well, we will do what we can, which is express ourselves and expose this and be aggressively Asian by speaking out. That's how you be aggressively Asian, because they don't expect it. They expect us to shut up, say nothing. So we're being aggressively Asian here, giving an analysis, an understanding about this situation. How do you deal with ignorant ad hominem attacks in public by other media figures? Well, and this is the second part of my tweet that I tweeted out yesterday. Imagine what it was like for the previous generations of AAPI TV reporters locally and nationally. Stay strong at Betty KPIX. I'll comment on amok.com, and here's my comment. Yeah, think about what it was like for generations now. We're talking about when I first started at KRON, when it was an NBC affiliate in 1981. It was the NBC affiliate. I was the only Filipino American at a network news operation. There were just three: ABC, NBC, CBS. We don't count Fox. I don't think there was a Fox. There were independent stations, and the independent stations, there were some there was an African American guy. Dennis Richmond was at the independent station, which ultimately became Fox. Lloyd LaQuesta was at the independent station. But as far as who was at a network affiliate, ABC, CBS, NBC, I was it, Filipino. There were Asian Americans. There was Chinese when I got there in 81. Tron had a strike. Vic Lee was behind the desk, the assignment desk. And both Vic Lee and Lindy was a reporter, but they were on that reporting staff that I was a part of at KRON in San Francisco. So I know this territory. I know what it's like to be an Asian American in San Francisco. My God, 40 years ago. There were only 3 networks. There was no social media. And people could not hide behind a handle in social media and go after you. And people didn't have shows like YouTube where they could say things about you and what you are about. What they did was send hate mail. There was no email in 1980, 81. I don't recall email. Letters. We had letters. We had, I think AOL was starting up back then. But we also, no, I don't even think AOL was around. We had letters, for goodness sakes. One in particular I remember. It was a series of letters. It was they were postcards, and they were typed out. And they usually started out, to me, "Hey, monkey. Hey, monkey." I remember being too self-absorbed to, "Hey, I'm here, top 5 market. I'm this 24." I just thinking like, "Oh, wow, this is cool." Not even being, not really understanding the weight of what was happening. As I looked at that postcard and I saw, "Oh, you people used your fingers instead of toilet paper." I just sort of put it aside. Are they talking to me? So I did a De Niro. Are you talking to me? They were talking to me, the non-white, brownish, Asian American reporter. Except I didn't know who they were, right? It was an anonymous postcard, and a series of anonymous postcards came. They were smart. Every month or so, you'd get one. But it was always something in the back of your mind to let you know what kind of world you were reporting on. So when I get this note in Twitter yesterday or day before from a friend of mine, a Latinx guy, lawyer, puts it out to a lot of people he knows and Asian Americans who are in the media. These are kind of the things that went through my head about Betty Yu and what she's going through now. And as I said, appalling but not surprising, racist social media where people come out of rocks or come out from under rocks and hide behind handles, or in this case, they were just doing a political comedy, pop culture, news-oriented kind of show. Look, free speech applies in general, but the First Amendment only applies to congressional, Congress can make no law. So it applies to government entities. A private entity like YouTube, which allows them a voice, can crack down on them. Whoever gives them money can crack down on them. But ultimately, they're going to have to feel a sense of responsibility. May not be possible, frankly. That's where we are today. But as I told Betty Yu in that tweet, imagine what it was like 40 years ago. Previous generations of AAPI TV reporters trying to make it in the media, the all-white, essentially all-white media. And as I said, getting these postcards to just kind of like knock you off your game, to just remind you that, hey, monkey. Hey, monkey. And that's the way I saw it. I mean, I think about it more now in retrospect. But back then I was just an idealist, thinking nothing's going to stop me. I'm not going to be stopped by this BS. I'm not going to let it get to me. I'm here and they can deal with it. So I had a kind of overweening sense of me that might have been taken wrong by some folks. But it was me and my way of dealing with things like that postcard. Or dealing with things like, can you imagine now? I mean, now there are more Asians. There are more Asians in society. I mean, 1980, 81. That's just less than 20 years after 1965 when the floodgates were open for immigration. 1982 is when Vincent Chin was killed. We talked about that in previous weeks. Lisa Ling did her show about how 1982 and Helen Zia, who is the executor of the estate, she told me, hey, look, in 82, people didn't even think that Asian Americans were covered by civil rights laws. So imagine what it was like, 81, 82. I'm some brown Filipino, Asian American Filipino with a perm coming on TV saying, here in Alviso, the floodwaters are up to here, or, saying, here we are at the school board. And imagine the people at home. Asians were cheering. Although there were some people, like if you're brown and you're on TV and you're out in the field and people see them, they might say, like, you're like every brown person they saw on TV. So in my era, it was like, hey, Rigo Chacon, a Latinx idol hero in the news when he was on KGO Channel 7. But imagine what it was like. You had to be strong because no one really cared, except a few woke people who said, hey, we ought to have Asian Americans on our staff, reflective of our community, reflective of, the South Bay, the North Bay, everywhere, East Bay. I'm talking about the San Francisco Bay Area. You think that in what is traditionally seen or known as the wokiest, we wouldn't have that kind of pushback. But there were some things. I got some notes. And mind you, and this is one sad thing. I look back at that Cron staff, 81 to maybe 83. Asian Americans galore. Vic Lee, Linda Yee, myself. Were there any blacks? Just a handful. Ginger Rutland was there. Tom Randalls was brought in. But then he left, and he's now somewhere in Virginia, I believe. It's tough being a person of color in the all-white media, and I'm talking about local. This is local news. And of course, when I left Cron in 89, or actually 88, I left Cron. And as they say, on the beach, I remember my wife was pregnant. Our first baby was due. And it was Christmas time. And I got a call from someone who was the vice president of news at NPR, who saw that I'd submitted a resume. And he'd lived in San Francisco. Had seen my work. And asked me to join NPR. Not as a reporter, but as a host. And that really, literally, changed my life for a brief moment. This is the media. This is the media in America. And now here I am with you directly speaking this democratizing. What is this? This space in my closet in front of my old gong, but speaking directly to you because this is the media in 2021. People don't write hate mail anymore. They don't write hate postcards. They just go online, have a show. It's two white guys, and they say, man, that woman's aggressively Asian. Talking about Betty U. They were talking about her, and that wasn't even the most offensive. I was more offended when they said, oh, she's kind of like a geisha. Racist and sexist. And just to add a finer point on the racism, they said, oh, I wish she had kept her fan. You know, like the geisha women with their fan. It was, was it an attempt at humor? I don't know. I just think that what we need to do is continue to shine a light on the ignorance of this one show. The show's called Louder with Crowder. Right to YouTube, condemn the show for its actions, and hopefully they will have a sense of responsibility to do the right thing. Don't hold your breath. They're not going to apologize, and if you demanded an apology, they'd laugh. That's the world we're in now. So there's only one way out, and that is to rise above, right? As Michelle Obama says, they go low, we go high. It always works. In my old days, I would be ready to fight. I would be so upset, it would get to me. And it would impact all the decisions and all the things that I would do that were not related. So the best idea that I have, or the best suggestion I have for you younger reporters who face this in this racist, appalling social media era, in the era of 9,000 instances of Asian American hate since the pandemic, I suggest you be, as I said to Betty U, I said, be strong, stay strong, be the best reporter, do the best work you ever have done, be the best, no pun intended, be the best you. Because the way you win in these kind of low level, I'm talking low level situations of hate. It would be different if someone actually got physically hurt, or someone was killed, or someone was somehow harmed in a serious way. Remember, I call this kind of a low level microaggression. Still, it leaves scars. So how do we fight it? Like I said, we rise. We fight it with, Martin Luther King would say, love. Corny? It's the only way. It's the only way because it's the only way to help yourself. It's the only way not to be intimidated by their bullying. If you fight it with love and self-compassion, it's the only way to make sure that whatever they say that makes fun of you, that is an attempt to shame you, that it's an attempt to say you don't belong, or that you're not worthy of your role as a purveyor of information and news in your job in the top 4 or 5 market. The only way to fight all that is with a sense of self-compassion and love. Show it to yourself. Show it for yourself. You're worthy. You belong. You're a good, honest, intrepid reporter. Do your best work now. Do your best work now. And know that you belong. When you do that, what happens is it shows they haven't harmed you. They can't touch you. And your response should be a general one to not just the folks who perpetrated this, but to everyone, to society at large. You know, there's an old saying that goes, I salute the love in you. I salute the love in you. I'm not here to fight, debate. I'm here to meditate. Think about it. And then fight them with love. I salute the love in you works. You take a negative, you're happy. They get it or they don't get it. If they don't get it, it's their own damn fault. But you get it, and you're good, and it's a way to survive. Just tell them, I salute the love in you. How little there might be, how infinitesimally small it might be. I'm saluting. And I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. So, Betty KPIX, at Betty KPIX, Betty U, I hope that puts things in perspective from an old guy who remembers getting a postcard that said, hey, monkey. 40 years ago. But it's the way to beat those guys on these small things. And on the big things, we'll get them in court, like they're doing in Atlanta with Robert Aaron Long. But it's a lesson for all of us Asian Americans who feel the slings and arrows coming at us on a daily basis, to be on our toes, but to stay supportive of each other, because every time I think, oh, we've turned the corner, it's going to get better, I don't know if it gets better. Oh, maybe the pandemic ends and then we just have the old-fashioned racism where the justification isn't COVID. It's just, you're another. That's no good. Stay above it all. Just remember the phrase, I salute the love in you. However small that might be. Your love. My love's big. My love's enormous. Your love, maybe not so big. Maybe it needs to be bigger. A lot of work on that. So that's Betty U. I hope that, if you check out my columns on the ALDEF website, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, I was just looking over how many times there have been transgressions where people have said stuff and no one's done anything, right? Stephen A. Smith, right, talking about Shohei Ohtani, saying, oh, well, Shohei Ohtani, we can't have that in baseball where the best face in baseball is Asian. Why? Why not? And there, Stephen A. Smith thinks he's apologized, but he hasn't apologized. But that's on him. We can only do what we can. And then there was another guy, Jack Morris, Detroit Tigers, making fun of Shohei. He got suspended. Jack Morris is white, Stephen A. is black. Jack Morris, Hall of Famer, but he doesn't make $12 million like Stephen A. Smith. That's one of the problems with corporate media. They'll back the horse they got money on. They don't have much money on Asian Americans. They like us, but they don't have much money on us. So beware. But I looked at my columns on the ALDEF site, aaldef.org/blog. And the Jack Morris piece, I talked about what kind of an apology we could extract from people. I don't know if we wait for apologies anymore. I know a lot of people want apologies. They want recognition. But at some point, instead of debate, meditate. Be equanimous. Rise above. They go low, we go high. Right? So good luck at Betty KPIX and any other Asian American reporters out there who are experiencing the kind of feeling I got when I got that postcard 40 years ago that said, "Hey, monkey." But deal with it. Probably better to deal with it 40 years later. So, I mean, I'm dealing with it now because I'm saying, wow, that really happened. That happened. And truth be told, it didn't come just from strangers. Sometimes it was people in the building. Another story. This week, you'll know that I talked a lot about Colin Powell. And this is related because, when I was a reporter at Cron, first Filipino, one of the first Asian Americans on local TV at the time in the 80s, it was a kind of mild, low-level first. And I want to point this out because I was recently on a show. My friend David Feldman has a podcast. He ripped into Colin Powell on the day he died. And it kind of got me upset a little bit because I wanted to praise Colin Powell on the week he died. And I guess this is where my friend and I disagree. He will not forgive Colin Powell for his 2003 statements before the UN Security Council that led to the Iraq War, where the claim was that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. It's not an insignificant point. And it's something that everyone who talks about Colin Powell has to acknowledge. It was his major gaffe. I acknowledged it. But I also say the time to go after him for that was in 2003. Not on the week he died. And yet, as I try to talk to my friend, it's on his podcast, it's up today, David Feldman Show. He just went after me like, do you know he did this? 1 million Iraqis died. Yes, I know, but look, this isn't going to bring anyone back. Let's just understand Powell's life. My friend believes he's a bad man. I say Colin Powell was a complex man. And a lot of it has to do, if you go to my ALDEF column this week, a lot of it has to do with being a first. How do you become a first? How do you go beyond your circumstances and become an African American who becomes a 4-star general without going to West Point, without going to an elite school? Well, just by excelling, ROTC, through the ranks, going through the ranks, all the wars. Someone said, oh, what about the My Lai massacre? Okay. All right, he's got another blot. I mean, I'm not here to forgive his major transgressions, But I'm here to see him as a human and say, okay, let's take him where he was in 2008, when as a Republican he backed Obama. Let's see him in January, January 2021, where after January 6th, he denounced the Republican Party, declared himself independent. He's trying to do the right thing. But what was it like when you are, and this I go to a piece in the New York Times, the guest editorial, which talks about the paradox of Colin Powell. And it's true. He's a paradox. Black, Republican, not Democrat. Black sounds white. Soldier, diplomat. How do you reconcile those paradoxical positions? Believe me, these are things that any person of color, any BIPOC, trying to get used to that phrase, BIPOCs, Black, Indigenous person of color, who rises above, you're going to be seen as a paradox. Name them. Obama. Single mother. Black, white. Hawaii. Occidental College in LA. Harvard Law. Chicago. Paradox. Clarence Thomas. I mean, I don't just limit this to the, it's all sides of the spectrum, from liberal to progressive to, if you're at the top ranks, you're not there because you're a good guy. My friend likes to say, oh, you got sharp elbows. Yeah, well, that's part of the game. That's why I'm in my closet. My elbows weren't sharp enough. But also, I didn't have that taste, perhaps, for that aspect of the paradox. Because the paradox is there. Asian American, Filipino. Filipino American or Asian American Filipino going to Harvard. Finding himself in the corporate journalism game. And seeing what it takes to rise. Totally different. I use as an example a person I met along the way. 1980, Dallas. Scott Pelley. We were in the newsroom at KXAS in Dallas. And he's a guy who is the epitome of knowing how to maneuver. I say that mixed praise, but some of that maneuvering is enabled because he's white. Just a reality. I watched 60 Minutes from time to time. But yeah, we were all reporters in Dallas. He was a producer, though. Before then, he became a reporter when he went to WFAA. But this is what happens. People rise and they face compromise. And if you're the only person in the room, this is the thing about this article, the guest essay by Theodore Johnson, who's a black, he's a senior fellow at the Brennan Center for Justice in New York, retired Navy commander. And I told this to my friend who's white, David Feldman, yesterday. I said, I'm writing from a perspective of a person of color trying to reach these rarefied ranks. It's not easy. It's not. And I imagine in 2003, you think you're in charge. You think you are the top, but you're still carrying someone's water. Who really was motivated to go into Iraq and get Saddam Hussein? But George W. Bush. And here's the thing about George W. Bush. And my friend acknowledges this when he did his show on Monday. He did a podcast on Monday, he did a podcast that dropped today. Said, George W. Bush, he does some nice drawings, but he's a bad man too. Yeah, they were all bad men. Rumsfeld, G.W., Cheney. Where was Powell? He was working for all of them. My friend says, well, he could have quit. Yeah. But he also had a sense of responsibility as a soldier. You can come at him hard. You can say he's responsible for all those deaths. I just say, look, I'm not forgiving him for those errors. And people will come after him hard. They'll say, be tough, be tough, be tough. Hagiographies we don't need. But sometimes instead of debate, we need to meditate. Take a second. You breathe. And you say, look at Powell's life. And because my friend said, oh, look, I brought up the issue that I was in Washington, D.C. when Richard Nixon died. And when Richard Nixon died, no one ever mentioned Watergate. And he said, well, Nixon paid a price. He had to leave saying, not going to have Richard Nixon to kick around anymore. Okay, he was disgraced, but if you read The Paradox of Colin Powell in the New York Times, it's in the print edition today. Powell paid a price. He was not in the rank and file of the GOP. Neither was George W. Bush. Not after Trump took over. And not in these times. And frankly, as I said, this week, and why I praise Powell, if you like a two-party system, you got to like the guys who believe in two-party fairness. People like Powell. Not people like Bannon or Trump. And that's the thing about Powell. You don't get that perspective of Powell unless you're a person of color. Unless you know how hard it is to be the only black person in the room, or the only person of color, the only black indigenous person of color in the room. You are not in charge. You are still carrying someone's water. And you can't be your own man or woman. I mean, even if you're the president of the company, of a publicly traded company, there is this little thing called shareholder value. Shareholders rule. Board rules. I mean, these are the things to consider. As we assess Powell, and I think I was just amazed because and maybe it's just me right now where I am in my life. My initial reaction was to embrace Powell and to take him for what he is, what he stands for, not to go into his, to go at 50,000 feet looking down and trying to give him an appreciation. Try to show him and his family a little compassion and a little love. Because, my friend, this week proved that there will be people going after him. Look what he did in My Lai. Look what he did in... Okay, all right. The ICC can go after him, but the United States isn't buying the... Okay. Let's look at Colin Powell, the human being, for goodness sakes. Have a little compassion. Because unless you can have compassion for all, we're not all going to get to the promised land together. That's why I say, time for debate, time to meditate. Sometimes the meditative way, well, I think most times the meditative way will get you through. Don't ask me about Biden's infrastructure plan. I don't know where that's going. I got to meditate some more on that. Maybe next week. Oh boy, Colin Powell started the week with his death, ended the week with kind of defending him a little bit, but not excusing his mistakes, not ignoring the blot. I just don't need him begging for mercy right now. He's dead. I need to show some compassion. As an individual, as an American, and let the historians dig into the record and reveal it, and let's see it come out in book form, all the details about how it was him and not Bush and Rumsfeld and Cheney. That's the thing. Don't beat up on Powell, the only black man in the room. And if you've been a BIPOC, you've been the only BIPOC in the room, you kind of know the price that you either paid or didn't pay. That's what it's like being a racial minority in America. Unfortunately. I mean, it's sad. It's still the case. Whether you're Colin Powell or Betty Yu at KPIX, right? We're still feeling it. Just got to fight it. Say you belong. Say you're worthy. Say you can do it. You're the best reporter. You're the best person. And then you just have to give that love salute. I salute the love salute. That I salute from my love to your love, the love salute. And when I heard that, the other day, I just said, oh, that's great, the love salute. The love in me salutes the love in you. I think Bono had a better song that could apply. Bono. I interviewed Bono back in the 80s when he was not as well known. Hey, good weekend ahead. Next week, Filipino American History Week, or Filipino American History Month continues. Larry Itliong's birthday coming up. And the Latinx folks and Asian Americans, the Filipino folks, are marching together down south of Delano, where the field Well, the field workers are still Filipino and Latinx. So they're going to be honoring Larry Itliong and Cesar Chavez. Isn't that funny? I mean, I'll talk about this next week, but Chavez was the love guy, right? Chavez was the guy who was like Martin Luther King. And Larry Itliong was this seven-finger Larry, right? Had a cigar, salty tongue, fought everybody, gambled, and he and Chavez never saw eye to eye, right? I mean, they were feisty, those Filipinos. And they said, "Wait, Chavez, he goes to church." He said, the Filipinos wanted to strike. They didn't want to march. And they said, a friend of mine, Ernie Babalan, Filipino worker, striker, he would say, I don't think following the Virgin Mary to Sacramento, that's not a strike. We got to strike. Ernie Babalan, yeah, Don's dad. What a guy. He was a great guy. Anyway, we'll talk about that next week. Next week, Filipino American History Month continues. Halloween week, I've got some things planned. Sports. Oh, hey, we need just a little second to talk about sports. Damn the Dodgers. The Braves. The Braves could have done it yesterday. They didn't. Let's cross our fingers and hope the Braves, Eddie Rosario, make a comeback. I was going to say you are the Dodger killer that the Giants should go after until I found out you make $8 million. He was a Dodger killer in game 4. Game 5, he wasn't a Dodger killer. And now we got a game 6. Right? Let's hope the Braves can pull it out. And then, I guess the 49ers are playing on Sunday. It looks like they're not talking about Trey Lance so much. So they're probably not, they don't want to expose him, but they'll expose Garoppolo, which makes a bit of sense. Because the 49ers put Garoppolo out there, they say, oh, he could still play. They might get something better for him when they ultimately dump him. Because he's not that good. But he's good. He's, especially if, he'd be good in New York. He could do GQ covers in the offseason. Jimmy Garoppolo, a handsome guy. But, so-so quarterback. The big thing is the Warriors. Oh my God, the Warriors are good. Although they didn't have the staying power last night. They didn't know what to do with the Clippers quite. I mean, they blew the lead and they hung around, but I think the Warriors are going to be exciting this wintertime. So there, a little sports something. I still have in my heart, I love to watch sports because you don't know what's going to happen. And, I have this argument with my wife all the time. She likes to watch murder mysteries. And I said, well, someone's going to die. I don't want to feel bad. She said, yeah, but you like to watch sports. I said, it's the same game. No, there's a lot of excitement in baseball. They pick up the ball and they throw it at your head and you try to hit it with a toothpick. That's excitement. And then maybe I'll give another shot at Squid Game. I don't know. I think when it comes to Squid Game, make mine vegan, please. We don't know enough about what happened with Alec Baldwin and that shooting incident. It does remind you a little bit about Brandon Lee, right? Bruce Lee's son. It's terrible that these accidents, when they have guns on the set, happen. They're investigating. Everyone's sad. But, it's going to be as the news breaks throughout the weekend, it's probably going to be close to the top in terms of pop culture. Just sad story about the woman, the cinematographer. Didn't see anything on the director, but this is the kind of thing that's not supposed to happen in art. It's not real, right? I mean, you can talk about life and death, but you don't really die in art. It's artifice. That's the tragedy. Okay. I think I'm going to try to get out and about this weekend. Try to be above it all in terms of, the good vaccine news. I'm still saying, if the vaccine deaths were up at the Himalaya level, they've come down to, if you're in the Bay Area, the Altamont Pass level a little bit. Maybe Donner Party level. They're down at the Donner Summit level, a little higher. But it really is not where we should be. I mean, it's equal to where we were in July of 2020. July of 2020. We're still kind of freaking out back then. It can go anywhere. And now we have another variant. I was reading something in the Boston Globe today, though, that said certain things that should have been super spreader events were not. And they were not because local laws were strong, meaning masks, meaning social distancing. But they did a study that showed, wow, we can do this if we pay attention and we care for each other. Once again, public health laws. Use the tools that we have, and we can do this. It goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning with Betty U talking about In-N-Out Burger and her being made fun of by these shock jock clowns on YouTube. Because no one wants to show, In-N-Out doesn't want to be the vaccine police. They don't want people to show the vaccination card they don't have. Because those people, the unvaxxed, they're the undocumented that we need to fear. They need to be deported. How about Florida? That would be good. All right. Some plugs before we go. We're here 2 p.m. Pacific, Monday through Friday. This micro talk show of the AAPI and the AAXs and the ALLs. If you're neither of those other things, you're certainly an all, aren't you? Only half of you is? Okay. See my replays on amok.com all throughout the weekend. I'll be putting things up on Facebook, on emilguillermo.media, saying, hey, catch this replay. Catch it. This is show 164. If you're saying, well, what show do you talk about Betty Yee forever? Oh, not forever. I mean, the show went a little long today, but we had a lot to talk about. Show 164. I think that's the show you want to hear. And then tell your friends, send this to your friends, make it go viral. Show 163, I talk about bitter melon, how much I love bitter melon. I'll talk about it next week too. This weekend, I'm going to go out to hunt down. I'm going to make a traditional pinnock bet. I usually make my own pinnock bet, like with bitter melon, and I love that. So it's mostly it's like 80% bitter melon and no fish or shrimp or any of that stuff. But it's just bitter melon and no eggplant, no okra if you want other people to eat it, because okra. I love okra. I love her talk show. I love her Super Soul Sundays. Oh, you know what I'm talking about. A little bit of tomato, a little bit of sweet potato, Carrot? Pinnock bet. My bitter melon. Life, bitter melon. Metaphor for life. All right. Hey, like us on Facebook. Follow us on Facebook. You can Twitter me. Let's say Twitter at Emil Amok. Listen to the show at Emil Amok. If you don't like any of those other places. I'm also on YouTube. Got a fledgling YouTube channel. And it'll show like no one watches. And probably that's true. But YouTube. More people watched me when Channel 4 was number 3. YouTube or Twitter at Emil Amok or more at amok.com. And don't forget the columns on ALDEF, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. That's ALDEF, AALDF.org, right? Here, let me put it. AALDEF.org/blog. Thank you again. We made it. And according to oh man, we went long. I got excited. You got me excited. Meditate, not debate. Remember that. Because this is the real Unyap. The real Unyap is where I tell you to just give yourself a hug. Don't let, you know what they say, don't let the bastards get you down. I think that's what I said when I got that postcard that said, hey, monkey. Friend said, don't sweat the small stuff. Perform an act of self-compassion, self-love, and shoot it out to the world. Show them that love salute. And then say this little poem. As I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Mahal Kita.